Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel, Aces. Yes, when I tell y'all I am here for the Reliving Single podcast, okay, with Erika Alexander and Kim Coles in a 90s kind of world. Hey, I'm glad I got my girls. Yes, keep your head up, but I am so here for it. So today was the first episode. Actually, they dropped two. They dropped episode 0, and it's just giving the backstory to everything, which I love a good behind the scenes. So it opens up episode 0, right, the podcast before it all started, with Erika Alexander and Kim Coles, and they are FaceTiming back and forth. They're really good friends in real life, which is great, but they're just talking about, Erica's in Puerto Rico, and Kim was just saying that it would be great to get together, start a podcast, and just kind of go through everything in regards to all the episodes and just give, us a behind the scenes look at Living Single. And I'm absolutely here for it. I love that show. It was one of my favorite shows growing up, and I was a kid when it came out. But I will say that Living Single, Martin, New York Undercover, Moesha, I mean, the Parkers, I feel like Family Matters, we had such a great, um, plethora of shows that gave us, the Black experience in comedy, that were not a monolith, right? They were, this varied representation of Black life. I mean, we saw that even on just the one show, A Different World, right? Which was a spinoff from The Cosby Show, and Erika Alexander talks a little bit in this episode about her role on The Cosby Show. She played Cousin Pam. But I mean, I'm like, wow, that's a void that's definitely missing now. And and the gag is it was on Fox of all networks, right? Fox was this up and coming new, network. And they were like the baby network that was trying to compete with, the big boys, the more established networks like ABC, CBS, and NBC. But they had all these shows that were targeted to, they were called, the urban demographic Black shows, like Martin, Living Single, and the New York Undercover, all ran back to back. And they were amazing. And I missed every single one of them. So I'm so glad that Erika and Kim are doing this podcast. So they sit down and they have a red table. So shady. So they have a red table. Shout out to the red table talk. I guess they said they were inspired by Jada Pinkett, and her family's format. But this episode's called The Pre-Show, Back to the Beginning, Season 1, Episode 0. And they are just, basically talking about how they both came up in the industry. Kim Coles, she was on In Living Color. She said until she was relieved. And Erika was like, relieved? She was like, fired, I got fired. So um, I barely remember her. Like I said, I was little when all these shows came out, but I barely remember her on there. I just remember mostly, of course, like the Wayans family, Kim Wayans. I feel like I heard somewhere that the reason why she got fired was because her and Kim didn't get along. I think that's what happened. I don't know if it's because she was close with one of her brothers, like Keenan or something. I don't remember. But anyway, she said she got fired. And during that time, they put her on kind of a limbo where they would pay her to, kind of wait to see if she could be cast in something else. So Erica's like, you were essentially like in a purgatory. She's like, yeah, I was in a purgatory, in the acting world, which I think is really nice. But so Kim starts because she was cast from the beginning. So when she went in, they told her that she would go and meet with executives at Warner Brothers, And Les Moonves, if you guys remember him, he was in charge back then. He was an executive. But so Kim, goes in and they ask her how she feels about Queen Latifah. She said at the time, she ran into Queen Latifah backstage at, I think, one of the award shows. And she said that she was looking in the mirror this way, and Queen Latifah was looking in the mirror that way. But they both ran to each other, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, I love you, I love you." And Queen told her that she watched In Living Color, on her tour bus, and Kim's like, "I love your music. You're such an icon," which she is. So anyway, they go in, and Kim is she really comes into her own during her casting, because she says that she asks for like a black showrunner. She's like, "Oh, I feel like we should have somebody black runs the show," which back in that time, of course, this was the 90s. Most of the showrunners and the writers were white, in network television. And so Erika was like, "Well, that was such a flex." And Kim's like, "Well, I didn't even know what I didn't know. Like, I didn't know it was a flex. I wasn't trying to make it like a power move. I was just asking the questions, that needed to be asked." And Erika, she comes from more of like the Broadway play background. And so, you could, like I said, you could tell that they're friends in real life, because they have a really witty banter back and forth. But she was just saying that she just thought that it would be really nice if they could keep it, with black women. So because the show actually came about with the executives from Warner Brothers looking at, they found, it was called the War Room, where the ladies were in Jungle Fever, and they were, it was a bunch of black women. They were laughing, and just kind of just laughing about life, and how girlfriends, when they get together, they have a kiki. And the executives at Warner Brothers decided that that scene in the movie was pivotal, and that they wanted to create a show that spoke to black women, which I thought was amazing. You know what I mean? Because like I said, I barely remember that scene. Of course, we know Jungle Fever was all about interracial relationships with Wesley Snipes, but and it was a Spike Lee joint, so it's like, okay, wow. But so Kim, she was like, "Well, I'll absolutely do it, but if it's a show all about bashing, black men, I don't want to be a part of it." And so she, again, Erika was like, "You established that boundary. That's a power move, whether you realize it or not," which Kim did not. I feel like she's a little bit more like her character Sinclair than she wants to admit, because she, throughout the podcast, was trying to like remove herself from the similarities, because a lot of people were asking, of course, the old adage of where the actor begins and the actress begins, and the real life person starts. But I feel like they have a little bit more in common than she may have wanted to admit, and that's okay, because Kim was really smart. She had to test to go to one of her high schools in New York. It was one of the best in the country. So shout out to Kim Coles. But I feel like it takes a genius to play someone who is like innocent and childlike, similar, to like Betty White, which I always felt like Living Single was a spinoff of the Golden Girls, even, right? They have so many similarities. But so anyway, they get cast, and when she asked for a black showrunner, they found Yvette Lee Bowser, who is amazing. She had done work with Hanging with Mr. Cooper and other shows. Like, she was not new to this. Okay, she was definitely true to this, and she is the one who essentially created Living Single. So after they cast the showrunner Yvette, they have Queen Latifah and they have Kim Coles as Sinclair. They start going into other cast members. So Yvette, told Kim that she's thinking about Kim Fields as Regine. And, Kim Fields is an icon. Her mother, of course, we know her from playing Penny's mom in Good Times. And Chip Fields, again, she's an actress in her own right, but she made sure that her daughters would gain that knowledge that, she had, just from her time in the industry, which I think is amazing, right? Anytime parents can instill those lessons into their, into their children, like, shout out to like Sissy Houston, you know what I mean? Like she kind of pushed Whitney Houston forward because she knew that her daughter was talented. Or even like Jason Weaver, he still talks about how because of his mom's knowledge of the entertainment industry, she made sure that Jason didn't just take that lump sum from him singing in, in the Lion King, but that he would get paid continuously, even now, because those residual checks from Disney are like long money. You know what I mean? Like you want to get in it for the long game. So Kim Fields, we knew her from Tootie on The Facts of Life, and even Alexis. Now, see, Alexis is more my age, and I saw her on like Sister, and just other things growing up. But both of her daughters are accomplished actresses, and so she got it. She got the role, Kim Fields, and then they started looking for Overton, who John Henton, shout out to him. He was a stand-up comedian, and he got his breakout, role from being a stand-up on the Johnny Carson show. I remember hearing about it. I never watched the Johnny Carson show. That was a little bit before my time, but it was a big deal, right? So late night, it was a big deal. And after, John Hinton's set on the show, he got invited to come and sit beside Johnny Carson on the couch. And so that was like a huge deal in and of itself because Johnny didn't always invite comics, on the couch. So after that, people started, ringing his phone off the hook, and just that recognition that he got gave him the entryway to become cast as Overton on the show. So while Yvette Lee, she was a writer on past shows like Hanging with Mr. Cooper, she had never been a showrunner before. So they brought in a showrunner, and Kim says, like to oversee the whole thing. Child, which that after she said it and after listening to them talk, it made perfect sense because this man, he was white. His name was Tom Anderson. And they said that he came in, but he essentially let Yvette do everything. Like she, created the show, she wrote the show, she casted the show. And he just essentially, let her do all the labor, all the work. But he still had his name on the show as the showrunner. And he was there to kind of ease the anxieties of the network executives. Like they wanted someone who was more established than Yvette, to, like Kim said, kind of oversee everything. So they brought him in, I guess, like I said, just to ease their anxieties, to have one of them there. And while she essentially just did everything, because the first pilot that she wrote wasn't accepted well. And then after they brought Tom in and she rewrote it, and they said that, Yvette, stayed up nights just kind of like sweating, and, she was really, it was nerve wracking for her because she knew it was such a big deal it was. But they said after that, then, everything got, greenlit, and they accepted the rewritten pilot. I mean, it's almost like, I don't want to say like heart wrenching, but just to know that, Yvette labored for days and she didn't even sleep because she knew what a big deal this show would be for, the culture, for just network television. And again, I know Tom was brought in, he was a seasoned showrunner, but he essentially let her do everything. And like they said, that he still kind of laid low, and he still collects residual checks to this day because he was named as the showrunner. And Erika was like, well, sign me up for that job. You know what I mean? You come in, have somebody do all the work, your name is on it, and you just kind of lay low. And they said that he kind of disappeared even off the lot after, a while after Yvette, I guess like proved that she could do it, the showrunner position. But he still collects he still collects checks for essentially doing nothing, or as Kim said, being the overseer of the show, which is crazy. But I mean, this is the U.S., so I'm not surprised. Okay, so moving on, they talk about um, Erika coming in, right? So Erika, she explains that she's from Arizona, and her background is more so in the play that she was, in the play scene in New York. So she traveled the world doing a play, and so Bill Cosby's wife, Camille, actually saw her at this play overseas. I think they were in Paris, and she came home and told her husband, you really need to see this girl. And she says she doesn't even think that Cosby, came to the New York show when they were on Broadway, but he trusted his wife. Kim's like, well, he trusted, Camille, and they wrote the you know, cousin Pam for Erika specifically, which is amazing because she said during that time it was like the top show in the world. She's like, there was not a lot of roles for young actresses, especially young Black actresses. She was like, you were either like a maid or a sidekick or, you know, on the corner or she was like, it was just very limited. She was like, you could get like a little stint, maybe one time on Law and Order or something, but which I'm like, man, Law and Order. Shout out to you. You talk about a show with some staying power. That show is what is Living Single is 30 years old. Law and Order has to be like in the 40s or 50s. I don't know how long it's been on. I have to look it up after this, but shout out to Law and Order. Oh wait, I looked it up now because I had to know. So Law and Order has been on television for over 35 years. It first aired September 13th, 1990. Wow. That's real. Shout out to Law and Order. Okay, anyway. So after Cousin Pam was over on living or on the Cosby Show. She moved to LA for pilot season. And, which I love hearing this, right? She's like, pilot season is when, actors and actresses come for auditions and, essentially try to get picked up for pilots. So she played a doctor, Cheryl Carter, in Jamaica. And she was like, I loved it. It was called Going to Extremes, which I never heard of, but let me know in the comment section if you have heard of it. But she said, I was definitely looking fly. She had just cut all her hair off. And, she said she loved Jamaica, which, I mean, I would love to go to Jamaica one day. But she said that, she was just coming from there. So she said she did, just like singular roles, like she played on My Little Girl. She said that was when she got her SAG card and, really got her foot in the door. So she said during her time in Philly, she was really coming into her own. And she said that that was really important because that was building up, for the Max character, right? Maxine was one of my favorite characters in, not only on Living Single, but just period, because, she was strong. She was a lawyer. She had agency. She had autonomy. She was just a boss, right, in and of herself. And I loved that. It was somebody who we hadn't seen previously on network television. So she went in for the audition for Maxine Shaw, and it was like the callback situation. She wasn't sure if she had got it, and Kim asked her to explain callbacks, and so, which again, like I love learning all these different, the lingo and the behind the scenes in the actor world. So she said that was when she was her first dealings with like pressure tests and chemistry reads, where they'll get people on set together and they'll do, just to see if the two actors have chemistry with each other. Now, I was thinking that that was only in like romantic roles, like, on Bridgerton. I remember with Shonda, she had cast the lead, Regé Jean Page, for the Duke in Bridgerton. the first season because he had been on her show For the People. But the young lady that they brought in, Phoebe Daphner, I think that was her name. Anyway, they had to do a table read, a chemistry read. I'm sorry, before the table read, just to see if they had chemistry and if they could, you know, kind of sell it to the audience, that relationship. So learning that, not only is that in romantic, um, situations with actors, but it's also with comedies. That's interesting. So after Erika landed the role of Maxine, um, they said that the way that their contracts are set up, they have to like kind of sign their life away for the next like 5 years, and that their salary is already negotiated. And I didn't know that either. Now Kim's like, you can go back and renegotiate your contract, but she's like, this is pretty much the only industry where you're like signing your life away up front. And 5 years in advance, and you really don't even know if the show is going to do well or not. So TC Carlson, yeah, he played Kyle Barker. Kyle was actually named for Yvette's boyfriend at the time, Kyle Bowser, right, which became her husband. It went from Yvette Lee to Yvette Lee Bowser. But anyway, so they said that Kyle TC, he had the dreads and he was very well dressed because, he was a stockbroker on the show, but he came from Chicago, and, Chi-Town is full of swag, right? If you ever met anybody from Chicago, they're going to let you know they're from Chi-Town. Okay. Shout out to the Chi. I love it. But yeah, I've only been there once, the South Side. I love Chicago. But so TC got the part, Erika got the part. Fun fact, Erika Alexander and TC Carlson, they have the same birthday, November 17th. Shout out to them. So they're born on the same day. But so that was the cast, right? The 2 men and the 4 women. And so Erika goes on to talk about how Les Moonves, which if you guys know anything about him and his complicated history, but she said that he had her back in rooms that, she wasn't even in. He said, if you guys say one more negative thing about Erika Alexander, it's going to be an issue. It's going to be a problem. And so she was just, really, she appreciated the fact that Les, had her back, and, because he saw her talent, he saw her potential, he saw the fact that, she was on Broadway, and, she was on the Cosby Show, and she was just a rising star in the making. So she said that after, she did the audition, she went back home and she waited, to be for the callback. She said she didn't find out until March, but of course we know that she got hired. And one thing I can say about Erika is I appreciate the fact that she, said that one thing that really stood out to her, her and TC, right, is because they, everybody else on the cast was very light skinned, and her and TC were dark. And so, Kim Coles, again, going back to that, childlike innocence. I don't know if she's just acting. I don't think that she was, but because Kim was like, really, because Erika was saying how it's difficult, especially for dark skinned women, to go to auditions and land roles and things like that. And Gabrielle Union and Kelly Rowland have both talked about this, and they're gorgeous women. But Kim Cole, she's like, really? Is it? And Erika's like, Kim, don't be, like dense. And so Kim was like, I mean, I'm just saying that my mom is, she's brown skinned, and I always looked at you guys as, just beautiful and chocolate. And so Erika, goes into colorism, and she's like, it's not something that we created. Even more so with, dark skinned women being seen as more masculine. She's like, on the inverse, light skinned men have it a bit harder because they're seen as more effeminate. And so it's not as difficult for dark skinned, black men. But she's like, but that's something that brought her and TC closer, right? Like, not only are they born on the same day, but they also have in common that they are the 2 darker skinned cast leads. And it is true, you know what I mean? Colorism is real. And, I know Kim was, she was kind of taken aback a little bit, but I appreciate the fact that Erika brought it up. and that we can discuss this, because Erika says, it's something that people use to divide us, unfortunately. It's not something that, we created, but it's important that people talk about it and, discuss it. And I'm glad that she did. And it really made her and TC more protective of each other, not only out in the world, but, while they were working together. I love that about her. One thing I can say I appreciate about Erika Alexander, and this is maybe me even, watching her as a kid as cousin Pam, but she always is very transparent and just open, about just her life, and like the characters that she plays. They're very down to earth. They're very relatable. I can definitely resonate and see myself in cousin Pam and Maxine Shaw. And I really appreciate that about her. She's a very good actress. One thing I did really appreciate as well is they talked about the lighting and how the lighting was different for Erika and TC. Let me go ahead and just let you guys listen to this clip because I love it.
Press the flesh.
Yeah, building community.
Yeah.
Saying we're going to go out for dinner. That's TC in the flesh. And that's who he was during the show. And so I imagine that besides sort of bonding personally, that that's to this day how we see each other as outsiders. By the way, I want to say it's no small thing. Y'all were all light skinned and we were dark. Well, y'all were also in a package deal that we weren't.
Right, but that doesn't mean that you were.
No.
If you
means
felt like outsiders, you weren't outsiders for long.
Let's say it's hard to get repped by these agencies and be dark.
Is it really?
Come on, don't act.
Was it?
You acting light skinned now.
No, don't do that, Erika.
No,
don't do that.
I'm being funny.
I'm sensitive. I'm gonna tell you. Okay, you're being funny. I am sensitive. I'm telling you why I'm sensitive.
You can't get sensitive.
I'm telling you why I'm sensitive.
Is it really hard being dark skinned? Is that what
that's not what I'm saying? That's what I'm saying. You said it's hard
being
being dark skinned and getting
into the agencies. That's what I mean.
Okay.
It is. No, but listen, it was also people say that even being in the music business that the light-skinned people are pushed. There's the same thing. Now, by the way, not if you're a man. Actually, it was the opposite if you're a man. For dark-skinned actors, it was harder for light-skinned actors to avail themselves because let's be real, but for the women, caramel and light was preferred.
My dad has been struggling for a really long time.
Sorry, y'all. It was an ad. Hold on. Let me skip this real quick.
Well, I'm just telling the truth. So you have to understand.
But
coming
we didn't
in,
ever
we were
treat
outsiders.
you like you were outsiders.
No, that's not net.
Okay,
that's
so I was
never
going to say, like, I'm always sensitive to that because I have a mother who's brown skinned and was the darkest one of her sisters and grew up in the South and is aware of the contrast. And it was like, I see you as chocolatey deliciousness. And I'm going to tell you something else about you and TC. It's because of you that we ever even won an Emmy. We didn't win any Emmys for our acting or our writing. Our lighting dude, I asked him, I said, Brian, I was like, what's going on? He says, no, when Erika or TC come, they have a special light to illuminate their skin. I'm hooking them up. He won Emmys because of your skin color. So I'm like, it's beautiful. And I sometimes when I hear you talk about it, I feel like, is it?
No, don't take it on, Kim. Okay. I talk about it freely because it's my journey.
I got it.
And I have to speak up for me and TC in that way to say that we're also outsiders in that way. And it's not outsiders
but not from us.
No, it's just how it is. If you come in and everyone sort of has whatever, you just sort of wink at each other like, and it happens. Even inside of Black communities, we have colorism. We didn't create this really horribly designed perception. We're inside of it. So we're protective of each other in that way because we also know that there may be some of that preferential treatment coming, not from y'all, but it's just what the business is.
Thank you for giving me that other layer because I'm not.
I absolve you.
Okay, I'm not aware of that because it immediately I don't see it that way. Like I said, I grew up in a household with a mother who's brown skinned and was very, the contrast was talked about and all the things. In fact, my summers were the best because I would get extra money to go to the beach and get brown like a berry like her. And then we would compare arms like, look, you brown like me.
And yet there's people walking around like me with bleach creams.
Right.
And that's what we're talking about. And so that's got to speak to, hopefully, why the 90s was successful. But I talk about it a lot because I'm dark skinned. I'm not even the darkest skinned person in the room, but I talk about it because somebody needs to talk about it, to say that we carry the burden in the room of not just our talent, but of the race. The race is in a conversation that's colorism too, not because we created it, because we're in these United States. And one of the things that they could do is separate us with this, not this conversation, but distinguish us different. And that's not your fault. I just love the fact that that's our family. We put it together. We come in as equals. But I'm saying our mindsets also can be different, me and TC.
Okay.
That's all. Okay. And that don't have nothing to do with the love and the treatment we got from anybody.
And the respect that you
see that
for your talent and for your skin.
Let me be clear about that.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm just glad that, I wanted you guys to hear that because I feel like that's something that's really important. When I think of living single, I never really even thought of the colorism aspect, but hearing it from Erika and just, hearing how it brought her and TC closer together. Also, shout out to the lighting guy, right, who won an Emmy. But that, even Kim was completely oblivious to, her position or of privilege, right? Erika said she was acting real light skinned, which I think is hilarious. But listen, privilege is something that I feel like it brings blinders with people. Like I realize that, me being able-bodied, right? Me being essentially healthy is a privilege. It's not something that I did to necessarily earn it, right? I was just born by the grace of God with, working limbs and, I can walk around and I'm able-bodied. Being able to speak English, fluently, or even having an American accent oftentimes is a privilege. Again, is it something that I earned? No, it's something that I was born here in the US, and the American accent is something that is widely regarded as a neutralized accent. And, it's something that, is a privileged over other countries' accents. It's not anything that we did to necessarily quote unquote earn that. It's just something that was happenstance, but it's something that people, value. What's another? I'm a Christian, right? In this country and in a lot of countries around the world, that's a privileged status. So I could go on and on, but I'm just saying that, being lighter skinned in a country, in a westernized country, is a privilege. I mean, and there's been multiple studies on it, but I'm glad that they unpacked that conversation because it's something that I feel like it's really important for people to have. So then the ladies go on and talk about Fox Network. And Fox Network, was, again, like I mentioned earlier, it was the new kid on the block. It was very, very new. And they wanted to target a younger demographic. They target marginalized communities, Black and Brown, Black and Latino communities specifically was their programming. Like I said, Martin was on Fox. Martin, Living Single, New York Undercover, In Living Color was on Fox. Keenan Ivory Wayans talks about how, when he went in to, create a Living Color sketch show, that, and I think Damon Wayans has talked about this as well, but the executives told him, I forget what happened. He was walking out the door and they said, okay, you can do what you want to do. And he actually put that in the line of the song, the theme song with Heavy D. You can do what you want to do in living color. So that was incorporated into the song. And of course, Keenan Ivory Wayans, he made it. I mean, it spoke to the culture, right? Kim Cole, she's like, we had a DJ. They had the Fly Girl. Shout out to Jennifer Lopez. But they had, just sketch comedy that spoke to our culture. And, they had, of course, guest stars and musical acts, similarly to like, Arsenio Hall back then. We had such a good, like, You know that saying, you never know what you had until it's gone? I'm like, man, we had some good TV. Like Arsenio Hall was ahead of its time, in my opinion, right? Um, the Apollo, you know what I mean? Like I used to sometimes sneak and stay up till like midnight or whenever it came on when I was little to watch the Apollo. Showtime at the Apollo. Man. Anyway, so Fox, like I said, they really targeted the demographic of young urban hip hop until they did a complete 180. And when you hear Fox, Fox Now, especially like Fox News, child, I haven't watched Fox, I think since they stopped airing like Martin and Living Single. I don't know, I haven't watched it in decades, but it is a completely different demographic now, their target audience. But yeah, so they talked about how Fox, essentially built their network off of the backs of black and brown entertainment, black and brown audiences, black and brown talent. Tale as old as time, especially here in the U.S. Unfortunately, and they said that they had, their trailers were like way out far in like the bushes somewhere, and in comparison to other shows that were on the same lot, but they were given preferential treatment because they were more mainstream shows. And she said that like craft services, they were eating like she said like eggs in vinegar. I'm like, what kind of foolishness? And they talked about how, their paychecks were of course considerably lower than than the other shows that were in comparison with them, in the marketing, right? She said that's something that she learned because Erika said that she really realized the difference. She could tell the double standards because of the way that the Cosby Show was marketed and promoted versus Living Single. And Kim jumps in and she's like, well, of course Cosby was under like the NBC umbrella, but she said that she knew that they could do a better job. Like Ally McBeal and other shows that were similar, right, to Living Single. She said that even while they were on their promotional tours, Living Single would be dropped off, or they would be, their promotion would stop while the rest of the mainstream shows would continue on their marketing and their promotion tours. And when they asked why, Fox and the rest of the network couldn't give them a straight answer. I was like, it's just messed up. And that's one of the reasons why I know T.C. Carlson, the Kyle character, got fired. And you guys remember they brought back in Mel Jackson. I feel like every single time they bring in Mel Jackson, that's always the seasons, like the show's last season. They brought him in to replace Kyle. It really didn't work. I guess going back to like the whole chemistry read, but Kyle, TC Carlson, he wanted more money. And he wanted to be paid, the cast to be paid in comparison to the other mainstream shows, which absolutely they should have, but they ended up firing him for asking for more money. Similarly to when they brought Mel Jackson on the Parkers, you guys remember, and he was supposed to marry Nikki Parker, and the professor stepped in. I guess they were trying to redo the whole different world thing with Whitley and Dwayne. It didn't really hit though, like a different world. But every time Mel Jackson comes on the scene, I'm just like, oh, it's a wrap. So yeah, there was a huge difference from the way that Living Single and the cast were treated versus other mainstream shows, and it's unfortunate because it was really lightning in a bottle. I mean, they did so much with so little, right? But again, like I said, that's the tale as old as time. And I was just listening to them talk about how, and you would think that they would be treated better or they would get raises in comparison to their performance, but they didn't. Or the fact that they had such a huge star like Queen Latifah, because when she got cast, I mean, she was already well known for being, a rapper, being in movies. She was a huge star. But no, the salaries that were happening, she said, over in the other lots, you know what I mean? She was like, they were not comparable. But she said one thing that they do love about Living Single is the fact that people, still come up to them to this day singing a theme song, telling them, how important they were to their culture, to our culture in the community, to them as individuals growing up. I know, like I said, I love Living Single, is one of my favorite shows growing up. So I'm so glad that they did it. I didn't know that they were being treated so poorly. Of course, as a little kid watching the show, you don't know, which is why I love this podcast. But, I am happy to hear that they're still receiving residual checks. I hope that their residuals are, nice. They're not comparable to the show that they did inspire directly, right? Because they do, let people know, like Friends. They asked one of the network executives if you could choose any show from Fox, to recreate which show would it be, and they said, Living Single, and then they said Friends came along shortly after, and they ended up going off air. They started heavily promoting Friends, and their residual checks are $20 million a year. I do know that for a fact. Every single cast member, rest in peace, Matthew Perry, but the cast, they get $20 million a year just in residuals. That's crazy. I know the Living Single does not get that, although they should, because they're the OGs. They should even get more, because Friends is essentially a spinoff. Or Friends stole Living Single. I'm not even gonna mince words, because they do, because it's their podcast and they're still in the entertainment industry, but I'm not. Friends stole it, and it's sickening. But anyway, I love their podcast. I'm going to recap it. You guys let me know your thoughts. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel. Shout out to, all of the cast members. We love you. We miss you. Thank you, Erika and Kim Coles. Kevin Hart, Heartbeat Productions is producing this show. So shout out to Kevin Hart. And I hope that they do, bring on like Queen Latifah, T.C. Carlson, John Hinton, Kim Fields, Yvette, Lee Bowser. I would love to hear from her specifically, because she's the creator, and she was the real showrunner, to be honest. I know Tom Anderson was quote unquote, has his name on it, but he let her do all the work, and she's the creative force behind Living Single. So I'd love to hear from her side. But I'm going to keep you guys updated on their, episodes as they go back and rewatch. But they wanted you guys to, of course, run their numbers up here, but also go back and rewatch Living Single, because that helps their residuals. So if you have time, have it playing in the background while you're doing dishes or whatever, and help them out. But anyway, you guys, let me know your thoughts. Please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I will talk with you in the next one. Take care, Aces. Bye.